All righty, we're still trying to get through this budget hearing. So far, it's been pretty uneventful, and not too many people have bothered wasting their time watching it but me. But this is going to get interesting here because I think they're going to the contract, so stay tuned.
I have the next question. The amalgamated transit union contract or bargaining agreement expired in November 30th, 2016. And so we are wondering how negotiations are progressing on a new contract, and is there an expected timeline for reaching an agreement?
Joe, do you want to start that and maybe tag team again with Randy?
I just retired, excuse me, mostly after 30 years with the IBW Electrical Workers Union here in Portland. One of the things you learn, you don't mess in another union's negotiations. So I'm not going to say a word about that because it isn't the right thing to do, and plus we have a staff to take care of that.
Wow, what a cop-out by Joe Esmond there. He doesn't want to. He's the union guy. He's the guy that's supposed to be standing up for the union people. And here he is saying he doesn't want to comment on another union's. You know, we've never really liked him. We didn't think he's done anything for us as union members. He's just another one of those puppets that sits there and does what he's told.
The parties have had 3 bargaining sessions beginning on January 9th. They have 5 additional sessions scheduled through June 15th, and that's against the backdrop of the 150-day bargaining period, which technically ends on June 8th. That's just a date after which either party can seek mediation if they choose to do so, or they can continue to bargain if they choose to do so. Thus far, we haven't had any actual tentative agreements or TTAs, tentative agreements as yet. We've been working on package offers on a number of proposals that have mutual interest by both parties. We haven't gotten any agreed to yet, but I sense that there are areas within those packages upon which we could agree. It's just that we've been working with packages and the entire package hasn't been accepted, so their entire package fails. But there are areas where we have mutual interest. So that's the status. I don't have a date by which we would conclude. That's entirely dependent on how the parties progress in negotiations, and we're still in the middle innings of the talks.
Okay, nothing to report. There's nothing, zero. He has nothing to say.
I will say this is not unusual with sort of public sector unions having negotiated at the city, the county, and the court. So it's a different process than the private sector unions. So.
You mean the packaging?
The timelines, etc. We don't have a pen board. We negotiate with our contractors. It's much different.
Okay.
The private sector unions, which are virtually gone, I don't know what he's talking about. UPS, FedEx, the elevator union. There's very few people that are in private sector unions. Public sector unions are the only unions left in the country, and they're on their last legs, and I'm sure they'll be done by the end of the Trump reign.
So we have a number of questions about the new Trimet Transit Police Station. So starting with, I think, how the relocation will be funded and if it'll cost more or less to operate in a new location or the same.
May I ask Director Bethel to take a little first shot at that and maybe ask Harry to fill in some of the details.
You're correct. There are a lot of questions you have, and there are a lot of questions that people have as well about what's happening around the new transit police department. But the funding for this source is identified as a relocation of the current transit police department, which is downtown.
2 blocks that way.
Just a couple of blocks that way. I've been leased for a number of years. Cost of that lease has been increasing, as well as the space is not large enough. We're outgrowing the space. So in terms of being able to have a new place where the police can be.
They've outgrown the space apparently, and that's because they've grown the police presence. They continue to add the police state into the transit system. And this is not just here. This is a nationwide movement of putting the police state right in the citizen's face. They want the police state in your face. That's an intentional oligarchical move. And Trimet is part of the police state. It supports the police state. It takes transit-related funds and gives them to the police state. And we'll listen to the explanations. And, they're all bullshit, of course. But, let's listen to what they say about it.
And partnering along with the convention center and Metro and building a new garage and taking a condominium type of interest in there will allow Trimet to have property that it can be used, but it also will have savings over the long run of being an owner as opposed to being one of the continuing to lease. So the funding that's coming is specific for the transit build out of that particular space. If those funds were to be used for anything else, it can't be done. It has to be used only for the construction of the new transit police department.
That's not exactly true. They're using payroll tax revenues for this, okay? And I know the government has brilliantly figured out all kinds of ways to make sure that the crony capitalists have the rules written to make sure that the cronies get the money and not the citizens. But this stuff is coming from, wait a minute, maybe it's coming from a bond. I'm not really sure where it's coming from, but it's coming from Trimet funds, which means no, it doesn't have to be used for a police station. Maybe they have it written they have to use it for capital projects because capital projects owns Trimet. But it doesn't, there's nothing that says this capital projects money has to be used to support the police state. Even if it is restricted to capital projects, it doesn't have to be to build a police station. It could be to buy 50 buses or build the Powell Garage, which they're going to spend $60 million on.
And I'll stop at that in case Harry wants to give any more on that piece.
No, I think you described it accurately. We did do a cost-benefit analysis, and it was determined that it was in Trimet's best interest to build out rather than continue to lease, and there will be a need to remodel the current facility in the future. And the amount of remodeling that has taken place to date has really been fairly minimal, but we have there are several issues with the current facility that really warrant us looking elsewhere or doing a major remodel on the facility.
I might, if I could, just add a thing or two about that, and ask actually Dee to respond to some of the other issues about sort of the bonding limitations that we have. But I would also just note that, this is really taking this lease space, moving it to purchase owned space ultimately. We thought this was a great opportunity, first of all, because of the location of this garage space, which is right at our Rose Quarter Transit Center. So it is really easy to deploy our police in multiple directions on multiple lines. They're really a very busy part of the system. So that was very admirable. And we thought it was also admirable to help our partner agencies develop the headquarters hotel, which has been one of the region's
All right, well, we know the real truth of the matter is it's about the hotel and parking garage development. This is a way they can get taxpayer funds out of the Trimet pocket to help with the hotel. It's the same old crony capitalism we see every day, everywhere. Private industry, private owners, private corporations taking the public funds and making it for themselves, and that's all it really is. Okay, it seems like now that I'm listening to this, it's not even really about the police. It's really about the hotel.
Economic development goals for really quite some time, and perhaps I could just turn to Dee for the issues of funding and the source of funds for this one-time improvement.
Sure, the project's currently estimated, which includes the relocation, at about $12 million. It's primarily bond funded. We have some one-time only general fund capital dollars allocated to this as well.
Yeah, so they've got both. It's a bond, and it's also coming out of the general fund. And we've already covered the spot where they are withholding a big part of the money for capital projects like this. So, they play, this is really a scam of unbridled proportions, the way that the Trimet executive technocrats have hijacked the wealth of the agency, and they're making all the decisions about who's going to get that wealth. It's really a scandal, but, it's not going to get any coverage because there is no coverage in Portland of anything, really. Portland is one of the least, it's so gentrified there that there's no coverage of opposing points of view anywhere in that city, really.
The question has come, could this be used on other capital projects? As with all of our bond funding, we do include the ability to substitute other capital projects for bond proceeds. So yes, the funds could be, but they've currently been dedicated.
Okay, she just proved what I just said. They could use that for buses, they could use it for buildings, they could use it for anything. They don't have to use it for the police. They're doing that intentionally because they are part of the police state and they want to support the police state, but they could use them any way they want. But they've made the decision to do this. No public input, which is what they always do. They make the decisions, no public input. They have the hearings later after they've made the decision.
To this project.
Okay. Thank you. And as part of Director Bethel's comments, he indicated that the cost analysis is based on an expansion of the force. So we're interested in understanding what the justification is for that expansion, and if the cost analysis would still pan out if the force were not expanded, or in fact if it decreases.
Well, they're coming up with some pretty good questions here. They don't press them for better answers. They ask a question, they give them the answer, and then they move to the next question. Let's hear what they say about this, because here he's asking, why are you expanding the police state on Trimet? Let's see what they come up with.
So let me just note that it was based on the current costs.
Okay.
Right.
Moving forward. That's the analysis we did. But I would also say that this potential space has other uses for us in terms of deploying, for example, fare inspection forces or others, or other operations assistance on street, customer service staff as well could benefit because of the location of the space. So we think it will have multiple uses ultimately. Again, our view was that my view is that there will be expansions of the police force over time. They're not included in this budget at this point in time. But I think keeping the system safe and keeping our crime rate low, which it is right now, continues to be a really key focus of all of our efforts.
Once again, we just have more evidence that they're using this to build the hotel and the parking lot. He just said they're not expanding the police state in this budget, so it just leaves more evidence of the fact that they're leveraging the money so that these crony capitalists can take advantage of it. I think that's pretty clear.
Could you help me understand why you think that the police force will need to expand over time?
Well, certainly the system is growing. Yeah. And for example, if we're successful in beginning funding the Southwest Corridor project, there's expansions associated with that. The bus service is continuing to grow. We expect that sort of look over this decade of ramping up the payroll tax, we'll have at least 100 additional buses in our fleet and sort of multiply that out on the streets in terms of response times and the need to respond. And again, a lot of what our police force does is really focused on the safety of both our operators and our passengers.
That's a load of horseshit if I ever heard it. I mean, as you know, I listen to the operation, and when there's an emergency, when an operator needs somebody or a rail operator, there's always a long delay in getting the police out there. So that's, this is your usual executives saying, they pull the Donald Trump. They say what they think they need to say to make people feel good, even if it's not true.
And so if you have a bigger footprint, we'll need ultimately additional resources. We report to the board annually on the crime rates and statistics and situations. That has, over the last year, provided additional focus, for example, on the issue of operator assaults, which is increasing, very sadly. But for example, we will need additional resources to begin to respond to some of those issues as they emerge in the system.
Thank you. So just two more questions on the funding aspects. So could you help me understand how much interest is going to be paid on the principal for the police station project?
We'll have to calculate that for you. You know, we have a fairly low interest rate on the bond issue itself, and the project was named in the issue, so it's less than, that's about 3.7%.
Okay.
This is the other thing about the whole bond scam. It's really a scam for the banks, because the bond passes, and what ends up happening is the banks give them the money at interest. And I mean, 3% interest of $12 million, you can figure that out. This is the whole banking scam that we're all stuck with, you know. The debt service, the so-called debt service, which is over $100 million a year. This is the evil banks, which is what they are. We all know who they are. They're a parasite on all of us. They hook themselves into everything that's going on around us, including government, and they stick their little tentacles into these projects. And now, you know, the banks will make 3%, 3.5% of the $12 million. Well, I'm sure that's not chump change. It's 3,000. Well, let's figure it out. If it was $100,000, it would be $3,000 a year. Well, so it'd be $3 million. It's like it's a lot of money that ends up, taxpayer money that ends up going back to the banks. I think the banks should have nothing to do with any of this. I don't know why they do that. Why don't they just finance it themselves at 0%? I tell you why, because it's a scam. That's why.
Helpful, thank you.
And just a note related to the sort of bonding issues, Trimet does have a AAA bond rating from both rating agencies.
Congratulations.
We're very proud of that.
Unusual for a transit agency.
Indeed. And the other thing that I would say is that our, if you will, our debt service within our overall repetitive resources or continuing resources is very low, under 6%, well under 6%, which is the guideline in one of the board's strategic guidelines.
That's great, thank you. And so just last question on the funding part then. So the funding source for the debt service specifically will just be general revenues, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Really appreciate it.
Okay. Our next question is on the Federal Transportation Administration, which has mandated a transit asset management plan with a 2-year reporting requirement. What do you anticipate the impact of this plan will be in your organization, and what will be the first thing that you do once that plan is completed?
Maybe ask Director Baumann to take a shot at that.
Yes, so we've asset management is always important to TriMet. We've already heard this morning about some of the aging aspects of the MAX system that TriMet is on top of, the need to rehabilitate and maintain, and in some cases replace assets. So this new FTA requirement will actually further bolster that effort and give us some new tools to assess the need to repair and replace, and we'll continue to prioritize items based on the condition of assets, safety and security, reliability, and replacement costs. And Dee may have something to add on that subject.
Actually, Nancy is our project manager on asset management. I'm happy to let her elaborate.
Great. So as Member Baumann stated, asset management planning is definitely not new to us. We have a capital projects committee that meets monthly and looks at all those requests and the repairs, the replacements, enhancements, expansion. And so in the question of, what are we going to do first? Well, we've already been doing it, so it's not like there's going to be something new that we're doing. What it will do is enhance what we're doing by better defining down to the individual component those items that need to be repaired and replaced. So when you look at a bus, you can look at a bus as a whole, but we are going to actually take that apart into individual components and be tracking on that basis. So it's going to give us help us enhance our prioritization of certain assets and the replacement of that on an ongoing basis. And it includes existing assets along with expansion. And within the project itself, we have hired CH2M to assist us through the
Yes, CH2M Hill. They're in on everything. They're like really the one of the top corporate welfare companies, CH2M Hill, man, they're everywhere, and Trimet gives them millions every year, millions, because Trimet can't do anything themselves. They always need these outside consultants to do it because I don't know what they're doing. They got 150 executives, and who knows what all they do is sit there and hand out money. Here, take some money. Jeez, what a scam.
Development of the plan itself, the initial inventorying and condition assessment, taking the development of the actual tools that we're utilizing. We are approximately, I'd say, halfway done with the inventory and condition assessment and anticipate being completed with that at the end of the calendar year.
By having this be a federal initiative, will this allow you to compare other transit areas with yourself so you can see how you're doing with your asset management to others? Is that
That's
one of
what
the
we're
outcomes?
told.
Okay. I was wondering why this is a federal initiative when I know you guys have already been doing some of this already. You would think comparability would be one of the benefits from a federal initiative. Okay, that's what you've been told. And speaking of D.C., our last question is, with the new administration in Washington, D.C., more than the usual amount of uncertainty seems to be surrounding federal funds. We assume that you have committed federal funding that probably will not be affected, but any new projects that are in the planning stages especially, such as the Southwest Corridor, might be impacted by these uncertainties. Do you have any comments about that?
Yeah, maybe we could ask Bernie Bottomley and Neil McFarland to tag team on this one.
Happy to respond to that. When you look at the federal funds that Trimet receives, they really come in two different buckets. One bucket is programmatic, so those are funds that come to us on an annual basis that are not discretionary. They come out of the Federal Transportation Trust Fund. That fund is authorized in the FAST Act until 2020, so we don't anticipate any dramatic change in the formula funds that we receive on an annual basis. Those typically go into operations, elderly and disabled programs, and maintenance of the system. The other category is capital investment grants. Those are new starts and small starts. New starts support projects like light rail construction. Small starts fund projects like the Division Bus Rapid Transit program. The administration's what they call the skinny budget indicated that those programs would be phased out, although existing grant agreements would be honored. So the remaining funds that are due Trimet for the Orange Line construction, the federal funding takes a little time to catch up with the construction. Those aren't implicated. The administration's indicated that they will honor that agreement. But they have suggested phasing out the capital infrastructure program. At the same time, they've talked about $1 trillion infrastructure increase in what the federal government is supporting. So there may be some plan to incorporate those programs into that strategy. Separate from the administration, we've had conversations with the members of Congress and their staffs who actually write the legislation, and they've indicated very strong continued support for the capital investment grant programs, and have said that there won't be a bill passed, at least on the Senate side, without those programs included in it. So there's very strong support on the Hill. And then I would say that the Federal Transit Administration continues to indicate to Portland, to Trimet and other transit districts around the country that they should continue to develop projects that would be submitted for federal funding in the construction grant program. So so far, the indications are we should continue to move forward with our planning efforts. Our timing is about right. We don't have any projects that need funding today, so we have time to see how this plays out as we move forward.
When would the Southwest Corridor project be ready to ask for federal funds?
So we still have a couple of years to go on the
okay.
planning process before we'd be in a position to submit for federal funding.
Sounds like your government relations team must be busy both in Salem and in
There's
DC.
a lot going on, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I have another.
Okay. Did anyone sign up? Craig, I saw you went.
No, no one has signed up to speak.
Okay. So thank you all for your...
David, could I ask
sure.
a question? Thanks.
Okay. Just
So
got me.
I was wondering about, you spoke about the safety management system as being one of kind of the key investments for the upcoming year, and I don't have a good sense for what all is entailed in the safety management system and what the emphasis of that is. Could somebody add a little color to that for us?
A lot of the funding for it are both some consultants to help us as well as training. And I'll let Harry get into
More consultants for the bloated bureaucracy. This has been a very disappointing meeting. There's been nothing here that's really significant to know. It's all smoke and mirrors. But what I really walk away with is how ridiculous the whole system really is. I mean, you have this group of overpaid fat cat executives playing with buckets of money that they're handing around. Meanwhile, they're bragging about how great their system is, and we already know that's a fucking lie. While we're 90% on time, lie. I mean, you can see what a farce this whole public transportation industrial complex really is. It's nothing but a way to take taxpayers' money and redistribute it to the people that work in the public into this industrial complex and return very minimal services to the public. Nothing about Trimet services are excellent, okay? It's not an excellent service. It's packed, it's dirty, it's crowded, it's late. There's nothing better here than anywhere else in terms of the overall quality of the service. It's the same everywhere in this country. It's very minimal and it's very unpleasant to use. But you see what a great time these people are having with all of their ideas and their money and their consultants and their contracts. It's like it's the other reality of transit. There's people that need transit, and then you have this whole bunch of people that are making all this money doing all this other stuff that's not related to the people that actually need transit. And there's your government for you. It's just not there for you, man. It's there for the special interests.